Hi everyone, this is group 5 and we consist of Mitchell, myself, Laura, Samantha, Jen, and Kyle, and we are presenting on substance abuse in the veteran population.
Okay, we'll do the definition of a veteran is the Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations defines a veteran as a person who has served in active military, Navy, or air service, and who is discharged under regular conditions other than dishonorable. But not all veterans, of course, are active combat. The current statistics of our veterans are, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there were about 18 million veterans in 2019. This makes up 17% of our adult population of the United States. This is currently lower by 6 million veterans who served in World War II that have passed away within the last few years. A shift in our veterans. So of the 18 million veterans who are still inactive and living, half entered the military during the draft, while the other half were volunteers. Today, women make up 9% of all our veterans. And since the Gulf War, more than 3/4 of our veterans have a college education of some level, which is a huge difference. So the cohorts are the World War II, the median age for them was 93 with 500,000 still living. The Vietnam era is a median age of 65 with 6.4 million living. That's the largest one. More than 3/4 of them are white males. Then we get to the post 9/11 era, which their median age is 37, the largest cohort with severe related disabilities. And most groups, let's see, only 1/3 of them identify self as other than white. So substance use disorder are the amount of most common and costly medical problems in veterans and active duty military personnel. SUDs and mental health conditions frequently coexist as dual diagnosis. Approximately 1/3 to a half of the patients seeking treatment with SUD also treat critical for PTSD. And that number is probably even higher for PTSD that have SUD problems. These individuals may turn to substance as a way to self-medicate, especially through traumas related to time in service, and not all trauma is just related to being active duty in the line of fire. So a lot of the big barriers these veterans have problems with seeking for the treatment are the stigma. Just like a lot of things, the veterans have the big stigma of that they're military, so they don't go get help. Negative beliefs about addiction and the care they are given. Discomfort about asking for help. It's a big problem. Zero tolerance during their active duty. So they're used to not being zero tolerance, like can't have any drugs, anything that, so they don't even want to come forth like they did have this. Another big one I found out about was the concept of the VA service providing the SUD information to Department of Defense. They think that they'll be told on and somehow get back to their squad mates or even their old commanders, and they'll still get in trouble for it.
And I'm going to be talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. So when we talk about group therapy used to treat substance abuse disorder, there are 5 models of groups that we commonly refer to. That's going to be psychoeducational groups, which teach about substance abuse, skills development groups, which hone the skills necessary to break free of addictions, cognitive behavioral groups, which rearrange patterns of thinking and action that lead to addiction. That's going to be what we zero in on here in a second. Support groups, which comprise a forum where members can debunk each other's excuses and support constructive change. And then there's interpersonal process group psychotherapy, which enables clients to recreate their pasts in the here and now of group and rethink the relational and other life problems that have previously fed by means of addictive substances. So cognitive behavioral group approaches. So we can take cognitive behavioral therapy for substance abuse disorder groups and zero in even further with behavior therapy groups, cognitive therapy groups, rational emotive behavioral therapy groups, and reality therapy groups. Some common features you're going to find in all 5 are collaborative relationship between group and the therapist. Psychological distress is a function of disturbances in cognitive processes. The focus is going to be on changing cognitions to produce desired changes in affective behavior. So how I always like to think of it is that cognitive behavioral therapy can be thought of as like a stool, where one leg, a three-legged stool, where one leg is our thoughts, one leg is our emotions, and one leg is our actions. And so one of those features is going to be focusing on changing our thoughts so that we can get a desired outcome in our behaviors. Another thing is you're going to find in a lot of cognitive behavioral groups is that they are very present focused. And that just kind of goes back to the next point, which is that cognitive behavioral groups are going to be very structured to target problems. So clear goals and clear objectives, because it is present focused and it's focused on solving the problems right now. And you will find that a lot of cognitive behavioral groups are time limited. So they're not going to be ongoing forever. They're going to be limited to a certain amount of sessions. And you'll also find that there's a lot of empirical validation for the concepts and techniques in cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive behavioral group therapy, you're going to conceptualize dependency as a learned behavior that is subject to modification through various interventions. And so that's just saying that dependency on a substance is a behavior that is learned. And just like any other behavior that is learned, it can be curbed through different interventions. There's going to be a high importance on social network to support and sustained abstinence. Understanding that different thoughts and beliefs are affected by substance abuse, creating harmful patterns. So going back to that stool, if it's thoughts, feelings, and actions that make up, our cognitive behavioral therapy stool, if substance abuse is going to change thoughts, it's going to affect emotions and it's going to affect behavior. So that you're going to have a real understanding of that in cognitive behavioral therapy groups for substance abuse. There's going to be examining the thoughts and patterns that led to addiction. Emphasis on structure, problem solving, and goal orientation, which is sort of what we talked about in the slide previously. And in general, techniques should teach members about destructive behavior and thinking and focus on problem solving and goal setting, helping clients monitor their feelings and behaviors. So again, once we understand that stool concept, well, what are some interventions that can monitor my feelings, and my behaviors will follow from that. And later on in this presentation, Jen is going to talk about ACT, which stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, which is a mindfulness-based behavioral therapy that focuses on psychological flexibility and valued engagement in life.
Okay, so I am going to be talking first about creating the group. So when we are at first just thinking about how we're going to form and create this group, we first need to assess the interest of the population. And so we will do this by recruiting group members through the therapist or counselors within the mental health program at their local VAs, and they will refer the individuals to our groups, and then we will have some referral packets just that have information about what the group will consist of and what they can expect. We will have a pre-group meeting before the whole group starts, just to kind of clarify the expectations of the leaders as well as the group members. So this will consist of that people attend the group, they're respectful to others, they put their interest and their best effort into the activities and the different treatment that they will be receiving during this group time. And then we will also establish some ground rules, again, just kind of clarifying that we want these members to attend the entire session and the entire part of this therapy. So they'll attend every session that's available so that they can get their best treatment. And then the group composition will be mixed gender, so males and females are welcome. They will be held at the local VA, and this will be a closed group. So the group will meet for 8 weeks at 2 hours per session each week. Okay, and so for the initial stages of the group, we will first just kind of review the informed consent that was covered during the pre-group, and also just backing those ground rules that were established as well. So we just want to make sure that the group members know that if there's anything reported to us in the group meetings that it warrants a report, that we will have to report it, and that everything we do will be in their best interest. So then we will discuss the group characteristics and the norms. So in our text, it talks about just some different characteristics and norms that groups can have. And so with this, they can come in with different fears of the group, and this can look like maybe fear of rejection and fear of acceptance between others, because these individuals may know each other, but they also may not. And so coming into a new environment could be hard for others. Trust is another big one. And as Mitch was saying earlier, this is something that can be difficult. In an article, it states that in the Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, veterans treated from the VA, which was 82% of them, had an alcohol use disorder, and 86% had a drug use disorder. And out of these, they had at least one co-occurring psychiatric disorder. So out of all of those that they found in this study, the most common psychiatric disorder between these two different tours, I guess you would say, had the most common psychiatric disorder was an alcohol use or drug use disorder alongside PTSD. And so when someone has this, it can just kind of make it a little hard to trust others, because they may be afraid of what has happened before in their life. Another characteristic and norm would be to be present. So that means physically and mentally present. So we want them in the group, but also mentally there to support the other members and get the best treatment possible. We want them to be open with each other, so breaking down those walls and barriers to be able to open up and share about things that they're struggling with and what they may need extra support on, but also being accepting of feedback from others, whether that is group members or the facilitators. And then overall, just being respectful for the group and the leaders, because they're all in this together and they're all wanting that treatment. So we will establish the group goals and how these will be accomplished. So we will talk through what our main goals with the individuals are and the steps that we will take to help them accomplish those. And then for how does this type of treatment help with an individual with a substance use disorder. In an article, it states engagement in a substance use disorder treatment and overall coordination of care may be improved if multiple services are provided in the most accessible setting. So with that being said, they can be getting individual therapy through the VA, and also maybe like medication management if that's something that they need, as well as our group. So they're getting multiple different types of services within the VA. So the VA can be their hub of support.
Okay, so the transition stage. Anxiety and defensiveness underlie much of members' behavior in this stage. The goal of this stage is to create a safe and trusting climate that encourages members to take risks. Establishing trust is a central task during the initial phase, but during the transition stage, clients are still wondering if the group is a safe place. Some of the most productive work in the life of a group takes place during this time of transition. Some helpful tools to keep promoting this trust is through prompts which ask members to complete sentences like, one thing that I'm afraid to say in this group is, if you really know me, you would. It is difficult to trust people because, or something that I don't know, I don't want you to know about me is, um, resistance and reluctance to express themselves sometimes represents a coping strategy that at one time served an adaptive function, but that no longer serves as a useful purpose. Resistance is a natural part of the therapeutic process and can lead to productive exploration in the group. It needs to be acknowledged, talked about, and understood. Participants also tend to develop a lot of anxiety related to their degree of responsibility inside the group. This is mainly related to having too much or too little responsibility. Leaders are more often confronted both personally and professionally during the transition stage. Leaders' competence is challenged. Leaders must know that not every confrontation is an attack on their skills or integrity. How the leader handles a confrontation to his or her leadership at any stage has a profound impact on the trust level in the group. Many forms of defensive behaviors emerge during the transition stage. One of the most powerful ways to intervene when you are experiencing intense feelings over what you perceive as defensiveness is to deal with your own feelings and possible defensive reactions to the situation. Your own thoughts, feelings, and observations can be the most powerful resource you have in dealing with defensive behavior. When you share what you're feeling and thinking about what is going on in the group without blaming or criticizing the members for deficiencies, you are letting the members experience an honest and constructive interaction with you. Doing this builds trust, which is often being tested during this stage. And next slide, please. Um, Next slide, please. Okay. Working stage. Most leaders strive to keep the focus on the here and now as much as possible. During this phase, the leader balances content, which is the information and feelings overly expressed in the group, and the process, which is how members interact in the group. Their therapy is in both the content and the process. Both contribute to the connections between and among group members, and it is in those connections that are therapeutic. Clients receive feedback that helps them rethink their behaviors and move toward productive changes. The leader helps group members by allocating time to address the issues that arise, by paying attention to relations among group members, and by modeling a healthy interaction style that combines honesty and compassion. People with addiction histories, however, remain vulnerable for much longer and continue to struggle with dependency. They need vigorous assistance maintaining behavioral changes throughout the working stage of treatment. Several studies have observed decreased blood flow and metabolic changes rates in the brains of subjects who abuse stimulants such as the case of cocaine and methamphetamine. The studies also found that deficits persisted for at least 3 to 6 months after cessation of drug use. Whether these deficits predated substance abuse or not, treatment personnel should expect to see clients with impaired decision making and impulse control. For a clinician, this finding means that clients may not have the mental structures in place to enable them to make the difficult decisions faced during this working stage. For that reason, support from the group combined with new behaviors and beliefs are key factors to develop during this stage. The frontal lobe activity in a person addicted to cocaine, for example, is dramatically different after approximately 4 to 6 months of non-use. Still, the mind can play tricks. Clients distinctly may remember the comfort of their substance past, yet forget just how bad the rest of their lives were and the seriousness of the consequences that loomed before they came into treatment. As a result, the temptation to relapse remains as a concern. There are some therapeutic factors that are emphasized during this stage, such as self-knowledge, altruism, universality, identification, cohesion, and hope. Practitioners have stressed the need to work in alignment with the client's motivation for change. The therapist uses whatever leverage exists, such as current job or marriage concerns, to power movement towards change. The goal is to help clients perceive the causal relationship between substance abuse and current problems in their lives. From the client's perspective, drugs of abuse have become their best friends. They fill hours of boredom and help them cope with difficulties and disappointments. As clients move away from the relationship with their best friend, they may feel vulnerable because they have not yet developed coping mechanisms to negotiate life's problems. It is crucial that clients recognize these feelings as transient and understand that the feeling that something is vital is missing can have a positive effect. It may be the impetus the clients need to adopt new behaviors that are adaptive, safe, legal, and rewarding. Clients need to use the group as means of exploring their emotional and interpersonal world. They learn to differentiate, identify, name, tolerate, and communicate feelings. Cognitive behavioral therapy can provide clients with specific tools to help modulate feelings and to become more confident in expressing and exploring them.
And I'm going to be talking about final stages. And so I think it's important to note when talking about final stages of group therapy that many people, myself being one of them, believe that termination begins as early as the first group session. And that's just because of the nature of group therapy, not having everybody always committed to attending every single session. And so with that being the case and different people needing to leave at different times, based on their own self-determination. Termination needs to be something that a group leader is cognizantly presently thinking about at all times. Therapists should be ready to deal with different feelings on separation from members. Not everyone handles separation the same way. We're all different in our own ways, and different people from different cultures view goodbyes differently. And so culturally competent therapist is going to be understanding of that when helping group members through the termination phase. Another important thing to remember is that even if members realize the group has helped them to be able to make meaningful relationships outside the group, they still may be in pain at the group's termination. That's just to say that just because they now have a healthy understanding of relationships in their life and the ability to make those new friendships, that doesn't mean that the termination of the group and the friendships they've made through that group aren't painful. Another thing for leaders to consider is that it's their job to help members review their individual work and the evolving patterns from the first to final session. So in termination in a closed group, a therapist is going to want to be helping the members understand their whole process of their time in the group and what they've learned, and reflecting on that and how to carry it forward with them. And member-to-member feedback on specific changes is important. That can mean a lot during the termination phase. It's something for them to remember as they leave the group, is feedback that they got from the members.
Okay, so with Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Act, Kyle had mentioned some of this earlier. It is a mindful-based behavioral therapy that focuses on psychological flexibility and valued engagement in life. It can be summarized as present, open up, and to do what matters. ACT gets its name from its two core messages: accept what is out of your personal control and commit to action that improves and enriches your life. Psychological acceptance, mindfulness processes, and values-based living help clients overcome obstacles to living well. The goals of therapy is not to eliminate certain parts of one's experience of life, but rather to learn to experience life more fully without as much struggle and with vitality and commitment. So the image on the slide is the goal of ACT. It is to create psychological flexibility, which includes 1, the ability to be psychologically present, aware and engaged in your experience, and 2, the ability to direct your behavior to serve meaningful life values. And this is accomplished through 6 core processes: contact with the present moment, acceptance, cognitive diffusion, perspective taking and observing self, values, and committed action. So each general session structure has an intro, and a part of this intro is a mindfulness and breathing exercise, and they're different for every session. Basically, it will set aside the clutter of the day-to-day mind chatter and get the therapist and the clients in the room. And
So sorry.
it should end. So that's kind of to get the group ready to go. And then they do new material and then homework. So those are the basic structure session. So next slide. Okay, so this is an example of what one of the sessions looks like. So with the group intro, we start off with that, and then we have acceptance in the service of effective action. So that is natural versus manufactured feelings. This is where the therapist can address the group by explaining the difference between natural and manufactured feelings. Natural feelings are basically built into the experience. For example, when someone's loved one dies, it is natural to feel grief and sadness. But on the other hand, a manufactured feeling is based on an expectation or a misperception. Even without realizing it, the patient may use the manufactured emotion to avoid the natural emotion. As a result, their unwillingness to experience the natural feeling will result in them becoming stuck. So, and then there's a mindfulness exercise. They're all different, and they can choose every week. The therapist can pick the one they would like to do. And then we have the blame scale. Okay, so the role of blame is basically in resentment for this specific example. And what would happen is you'll draw a horizontal line across the board and label it the blame scale. So the therapist we're gonna ask the group to notice that their resentment situation falls somewhere along that line. And then the blame scale has, is on one end, and then the resentment is on the other end. So sometimes a resentment is stuck sometimes resentment is because you are blaming yourself. The feeling that you are stuck when the blame is on your end may be guilt. So, but most of the time a resentment is because you are blaming them. The feeling that has stuck with when the blame is on their end may be self-righteous. So that's kind of the blame scale, excuse me. So, and then the next one is the corpus delicti. With this exercise or this activity, it's identifying the difference between pain and trauma that supports the client in stepping into difficult feelings or thoughts that are impeding effective action. If active emotional exposure has not been occurring in the service of changing behavior, at this point, it is critical to focus on the barriers to effective action. And the undesirable feelings, thoughts, and experiences the client is avoiding by choosing not to act effectively. So, okay, and then we have unwillingness. Basically, underneath it all, the client is still concerned about the personal cost of making life-enhancing but potentially painful moves. The client believes that limiting willingness for exposure to painful thoughts, feelings, or memories or sensations will limit the sense of trauma. In fact, the opposite is true, being willing to experience thoughts and emotions as they are, not as what they say they are, is what the difference between an experience that is painful or traumatic. Psychological trauma is pain that is compounded by unwillingness to experience the pain. It not only hurts, it damages. For example, panic disorder can be described as fear of the fear. By defending against the pain, clients in fact hurt themselves much more, and the effects of pain last much longer. And the next one we have is the two craps tables. Okay, so this is like a little, it's a metaphor, they call them in this modality here. So another component of staying stuck at times is the issue of right and wrong. We would tell the client that often the cost of being unwilling has to do with being right in some way. So you have a choice between enhancing your life or being right. So imagine that in Vegas, there are two craps tables. At the first, you wager your vitality in the hopes of winning self-righteousness. But because the house always wins, the longer you play, the more vitality you lose. And sadly, it would always just in the service of getting to be right. Now, at the other craps table, you wager your self-righteousness, and the payoff is vitality. As you play, you become less self-righteous, but you also become more involved and engaged in your life. And then with this particular session, they're going back and re-talking about forgiveness from a previous session. And then the last 20 minutes of this session, they're going to go around the room and they're going to talk about the goals that they have set and kind of what they're doing with their goals. And then the therapist will assign homework for the next session, whatever that may be for that. So next slide. Okay, so each session, and they also have different mindfulness exercises, activities. They call them metaphors, and then homework exercises. Another example of an activity is the values. Values are chosen. Values are chosen life directions. Values are chosen in creating a meaningful, vital life. This allows them to focus on setting goals that are consistent with their values. Values could be family relations, intimate relations, parenting, friendships, careers, personal growth, fun and leisure, spirituality, community life, physical well-being, and anything else that they may deem a value. Now, another example of a metaphor is the photo album metaphor, where they will recall a memory in a time. They remember how they were feeling. They remember how the situation made them feel. They try to remember who was there. And at this point, they try to view it from the perspective of the observer self, from the non-judgmental perspective of the observer self. So they're asked to reconnect with whatever feelings they may have been avoiding back then by observing from a non-judgmental view. Okay, so some assessments and questionnaires involved with this modality is the Bond and colleagues 2011 Acceptance and Action Questionnaire to measure various core ACT constructs. And then there's the Brief Experiential Avoidance Questionnaire, and this assesses avoidance and more technically experiential avoidance. And then the third one is the Bullseye Survey. This is a two-part survey used to identify personally meaningful ways of living, perceived barriers, and how to get around them. Okay, and some worksheets include, some of the worksheets included in the modality is the values, being the observer, being present, 5 senses. And so basically all together, all these items on this screen here, they're all including mindfulness exercises, activities, metaphors, homework, and assessments. They're all used to efficiently run a successful and fulfilling ACT group. The last thing that I want to touch on is the stand and commit ceremony. Basically, it's like the graduation of this, this therapy group here. And they're all going to get up out of their, so they're going to have like 2 to 3 people go up to the front, and they're going to have the rest in the group sit back in the chairs watching from there. And there's two roles. So you have the group up front, and their goal is to go up there, and they're gonna take a few minutes to get fully present in the room. They're gonna scan the faces of the people in the room. They're gonna feel what they're feeling. They're gonna you know, they don't have to stare them down or anything like that, but they're gonna notice the thoughts that are rolling through their head. So once they are grounded, they're going to be asked to step forward, and they're going to talk about and discuss the values and the actions that are important in their life and that what they want to commit to. So, and then of course the second group is the crowd group, and they're just going to watch as a role as they're going to be quiet. They're going to be relaxed. They're going to make relaxed eye contact with the speaker. They're not going to smile. They're not going to wink. They're just there to also notice the feelings that are going around. So they're playing two different roles, and they're each going to go up and get to do this opportunity here. And then after this is all said and done, they do a mindfulness exercise all together. And then the ceremony is over, and then everybody goes around, and it's kind of like an ending to this modality. So, but to wrap this up, just overall of ACT is basically acceptance of what our private experiences. It means that our thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. So, and next slide. And these are, we have 2 slides of references that we use for our presentation.
Thank you everyone for watching our presentation, and we look forward to hearing and answering your questions that you may have for us about our presentation.